The courtroom was thick with tension. For Neela, this was the end of the line. Her husband Timain wasn't just divorcing her. He was systematically destroying her, painting her as a failed, hysterical mother unfit to raise their own daughter. He had photos, financial records, and the damning testimony of a renowned child psychologist, a Dr. Valencia, who claimed Neela was emotionally unstable. The judge was ready to rule it was over. But then, a small, clear voice cut through the heavy silence. It was their 7-year-old daughter, Zariah. "Your Honor," she said, holding a cracked old tablet. "Can I show you something my mommy doesn't know?" With a press of a button, a video began to play, a video that would unravel a conspiracy so cold and calculated it would leave everyone in the room frozen in shock. This is the story of a mother's love, a father's betrayal, and the little girl whose secret evidence would change everything. The alarm hadn't even gone off, but Neela was already moving through the house like a ghost. In the pre-dawn darkness, her world was a series of silent, practiced motions, the measured scoop of coffee grounds, the low hum of the washing machine beginning its cycle, the sizzle of eggs in a pan. This was her domain, a beautiful, spacious home that felt more like a museum she was tasked with maintaining. Every surface gleamed, every pillow was perfectly fluffed, a testament to a dedication that had become invisible, expected. The faint aroma of a hot breakfast mingled with the scent of lemon-scented detergent, creating an illusion of domestic bliss that was as fragile as it was meticulously crafted. For Neela, this was the routine that defined her existence, a life she had chosen but one that had slowly, quietly emptied itself of warmth. She had learned to move through these rooms without making a sound, an unspoken rule to not disturb the peace of the man sleeping upstairs, the king of this silent castle. At exactly 6 a.m., the king descended. Timain looked immaculate, as if he'd been awake for hours, his shirt crisply pressed, his tie perfectly knotted. He didn't greet her. His entrance was a signal, and Naila's response was a reflex honed over years. She immediately placed a steaming mug of black coffee and a plate of hot food on the table just as he sat down. He took the mug without looking at her, his eyes already glued to the screen of his smartphone. "The coffee is a little bitter today," he stated dryly, the words hanging in the air not as a comment, but as a verdict. "I'm sorry, honey. I thought I measured it right this time," Naila replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Timain didn't respond. He simply pushed his plate away after a few silent spoonfuls. The silence between them was so dense, so cold, it seemed to freeze the very steam rising from their mugs. Neela stood near the table, awkwardly waiting for another order that never came, a servant in her own home, forgotten when her immediate utility was done. The only crack in this icy facade came with the sound of small, hurried footsteps on the stairs. Zariah, their 7-year-old daughter, burst into the room, a ray of sunshine in her neat school uniform. "Good morning, Mommy and Daddy," she chirped, her bright smile a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere. She kissed Neela on the cheek and ran to Timain. It was as if a switch had been flipped. He finally put his phone down, forcing a slight smile onto his face. "Good morning, Princess. Finish your food. Daddy will take you to school today." "Wow, I'm going with Daddy," Zariah exclaimed with joy, and Naila felt a small fleeting sigh of relief escape her lips. This brief breakfast hour, this performance of family was the only thread still connecting them. But as soon as Zariah finished eating, the performance ended. Timain stood, grabbed his briefcase, kissed his daughter on the forehead, and walked out the front door. He walked past Neela as if she were part of the furniture. No goodbye, no kiss, not even a glance. The only farewell was the roar of his luxury car pulling away, leaving Neela utterly alone in the vast, perfect silence of the home she worked so hard to maintain. She spent the rest of the morning in a blur of efficient motion, clearing the table, washing the dishes, tidying the rooms she had already tidied. She did it all with a quiet desperation, a hope that had become a prayer. She thought that if the house was clean enough, if the food was delicious enough, if she was quiet and small enough, maybe the old Timain, the one who laughed, the one who saw her, would return. But deep down, in the quietest part of her heart, she knew the truth. The old Timane was gone. He hadn't just changed. He had been replaced by a stranger who looked out at her from behind familiar eyes, and the home she worked so hard to perfect had become her gilded cage. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces as Nyla walked home from school, hand in hand with Zariah, listening to her daughter's happy chatter about gold stars and art projects. This was her sanctuary, this simple daily ritual, a precious hour where the world felt light and full of promise. But that promise was about to be shattered. As they approached their house, the familiar sight was interrupted by an unfamiliar one, a courier on a motorcycle, idling at the curb. "Nyla, package for you," he shouted, holding out a large, thick brown envelope. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. She hadn't ordered anything. Frowning, she took the package. It was heavy, substantial. There was no sender's name, only the stark professional logo of a law firm embossed in the corner. Her heart began to beat a frantic, uncomfortable rhythm against her ribs. "Who is it, Mommy?" Zariah asked, peering at the mysterious package. "I don't know, Princess. It's probably just junk mail." Nyla lied, her voice straining to stay steady. "Go change, and then we'll have lunch." The moment Zariah was safely in her room, Nyla retreated to the living room sofa, the envelope feeling like a lead weight in her hands. Her fingers trembled as she ripped it open, the sound unnaturally loud in a quiet house. Inside was a thick stack of crisp, official-looking papers. Her eyes scanned the top page, and the first sentence made the entire world drop out from under her. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." The words swam before her eyes. Her ears started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound. She reread the line, then again, hoping her eyes were deceiving her, playing some cruel trick. But the words remained, cold and final. Plaintiff, Timane. Defendant, Nyla. Reason for the suit. The wife has totally failed in the fulfillment of her marital duties. Failed. The word hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. Nausea washed over her. Failed? She had dedicated her entire adult life to this man, this house, their daughter. She had given up her career at his request. How could she have failed? With a growing sense of horror, she forced herself to read further, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The demands Timane was making were not just aggressive. They were cruel, designed to annihilate. He wasn't just asking for a divorce. He was demanding full custody of Zariah, alleging that Nyla was emotionally unstable and an incapable mother. And most devastating of all, he demanded the totality of their marital assets, including the house they lived in, arguing that since Nyla had not contributed financially, she was entitled to nothing. The papers slipped from her numb fingers, scattering across the cold hardwood floor like fallen leaves. Nyla collapsed weakly beside them, the truth crashing down upon her. This was why Timane had been so cold for months. This wasn't a sudden decision. This had been a plan, meticulously hatched in secret behind her back. She was not his wife. She was an obstacle to be removed, and he was ensuring she would be left with nothing. The front door clicked open. Timane had returned from work unusually early. He stood in the doorway, his eyes taking in the scene. Nyla slumped on the floor, surrounded by the scattered pages of his lawsuit. His expression was cold, devoid of any surprise or guilt. It was the look of a man who had been expecting this. "Honey, what does this mean?" Nyla's voice was a shattered whisper, tears beginning to stream down her face. Timane didn't deny it. He didn't explain. He simply took off his shoes, walked over, and loosened his tie, his movements calm and deliberate. "It is exactly what you read," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I don't want to live with you anymore, Nyla. You have failed. You have failed as a wife and as a mother." And in that moment, as she looked up at the stranger she had called her husband, Nyla knew that her old life was over, and a terrifying battle for her very future was about to begin. The confrontation left Nyla hollowed out, a shell of a person moving through a nightmare. Timmain had retreated to the guest room and locked the door, treating her not like a partner of years but like a threat to be contained. That night, she didn't sleep in her own bed. She sat in a chair in Zariah's room, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her daughter's chest, her own tears a silent river of despair. How could he claim Zariah would testify against her? The thought was a special kind of torture, more painful than any accusation about the house or her duties. The next morning, Timmain acted as if the earth hadn't shattered, waking Zariah and taking her to school without a single word to Nila. When their daughter asked why Mommy's eyes were puffy, he answered with chilling indifference, "Mommy isn't feeling very well, princess." It was a masterful performance, the first move in his campaign to paint her as the unstable one, and it filled Nila with a cold, gripping terror. She had to fight back. She couldn't lose her daughter. As the silence of the empty house pressed in on her, a desperate resolve took hold. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking as she searched for the best divorce lawyers in the city. But the harsh practical reality of her situation hit her almost immediately. Lawyers required millionaire retainer, consultation fees, expenses she couldn't even begin to fathom. A sickening realization dawned on her. She had no money of her own. For years, Timmain had given her a strict monthly allowance, budgeted down to the last dollar for groceries and Zariah's school needs. There was never anything left to save. Her only hope was their joint account, the one she believed was their family's emergency fund, the one that should have held hundreds of thousands of dollars from Timmain's successful career. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she opened the banking app on her phone, entered the password, and waited for the balance to load. When the numbers appeared on the screen, Nila felt her legs give way. Zero. The account balance was a stark, impossible $0. It couldn't be. She refreshed the screen again and again, praying for a glitch, a mistake, anything but this terrifying void. Finally, she opened the transaction history, and her blood ran cold. Over the past 6 months, Timmain had been systematically draining the account, withdrawing large sums and transferring them to another account whose name she didn't recognize. The last withdrawal was made just 3 days ago, a final transaction that emptied the remaining balance completely. This was no accident. It was a deliberate, calculated strategy. He wasn't just leaving her. He was financially crippling her, ensuring she had no resources to mount a legal defense. A sob caught in her throat as the full weight of his betrayal settled upon her. He had planned everything, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of his lies. In a final desperate act, she remembered her wedding jewelry, the last tangible assets she thought she owned. She ran to her room and flung open her jewelry box, only to find it nearly empty. The valuable heirlooms and expensive pieces were gone, leaving behind only a few cheap imitation trinkets. He had taken everything. It was in this abyss of utter hopelessness that she remembered an old friend who worked at a legal aid agency. She made the call, her voice breaking as she spilled the horrific story. Her friend was sympathetic but could offer little beyond a name. Attorney Abernathy. "He isn't an expensive lawyer," her friend said, "but he's honest and dedicated. Go see him. Explain your situation. Maybe he can help." With the last of the cash in her purse, Nila hailed a cab and headed to the address she was given, a woman with nothing left to lose, heading into a battle that had already been rigged against her. The cab pulled up in front of a tired-looking building with peeling paint, a stark contrast to the opulent world Nila was fleeing. Attorney Abernathy's office was exactly as described. Small, modest, and located on the second floor above a discount store. Stepping inside felt like entering a different reality, one of worn carpet and overflowing file cabinets, a world built on hard truths, not polished lies. The attorney himself was a middle-aged man with thick glasses and a calm, measured demeanor that instantly brought a sliver of peace to Nila's shattered nerves. He listened patiently as she told her story, from the cold mornings to the shattering envelope and the empty bank account, never interrupting, only nodding occasionally as he took meticulous notes. When she finally finished, her voice raw and trembling, he exhaled a long, weary sigh. "Nala," he said in a low, serious voice. "This is going to be an uphill battle. Your husband has prepared all of this very thoroughly. He doesn't just want a divorce. He wants to destroy you." "I know, attorney," Nyla pleaded, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "But I don't care about the properties. I just want Zariah. Please help me. I don't have money now, but I will pay you." "I'll do anything." Attorney Abernathy looked at her for a long moment, his eyes kind behind his glasses. "Let's leave the money issue for later, Nyla," he said firmly. "What's important now is that we have to move fast. This lawsuit has already been filed. We have to prepare a response immediately." He left the room and returned moments later with a thick folder full of photocopied documents, the full lawsuit filed by Tim Main's legal team. "Your husband's lawyer is Attorney Cromwell," Abernathy explained, his tone grim. "He's known for being sharp and not hesitating to use dirty tactics. Let's see what evidence they have presented." Nyla's heart hammered as he opened the folder, bracing herself for the onslaught. The first page was a series of photographs, and Nyla gasped in shock. They were pictures of the interior of her own home, but a version she barely recognized. They showed dirty dishes piled high in the sink, the living room cluttered with toys, and laundry baskets overflowing with clothes. "But this is unfair," Nyla protested, her voice rising with indignation. "These are photos he took when I was sick. I had a high fever for 3 days, and Tim Main refused to help. He took them on purpose." Attorney Abernathy nodded with a bitter expression. "I'm afraid this is manipulated to make it look like you are a lazy person who doesn't maintain the house, Nyla. They've created a narrative, and this is the opening chapter." They turned the page to credit card statements, and Nyla saw a long list of charges for luxury handbags, expensive jewelry, and dinners at 5-star restaurants, things she had never even seen, let alone purchased. "That's not me. I didn't buy these things," she cried out. "Was it an additional card in your name?" Abernathy asked. The realization hit her like a ton of bricks. "Yes, Tim Main managed it. He told me to use it if I needed to, but he took it often, saying his main card had exceeded the limit." "Oh my God," Nyla whispered, the world spinning. "He set me up." Then, Attorney Abernathy stopped at a thick document toward the end of the file, his face growing even more somber. "And this," he said quietly, "is the most damaging thing, Nyla. It was the testimony of an expert witness, a child psychologist named Dr. Valencia. The report, written in cold, clinical language, stated that the psychologist had conducted covert observations of Nyla's interactions with Zariah. The conclusion was devastating. It declared Nyla emotionally unstable, neglectful of her daughter's needs, and a detrimental influence on Zariah's psychological development. The report strongly recommended full custody for Tim Main. "This makes no sense." Nyla's voice shook violently. "When was this observation done?" "I never met a psychologist." Abernathy stared at her intently. "According to this report, the observations were conducted in public places, at the park, at the mall, when you picked up your daughter from school." Nyla was bewildered, her tears beginning to fall again. "Zariah always seemed happy with me. This is defamation." "Who is this psychologist?" Abernathy flipped to the cover of the report. "Her name is Dr. Valencia. She seems very professional and convincing." He looked at Nyla seriously. "Nyla, do you know this woman Valencia?" Nyla shook her head, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. "No, attorney, I don't know her. I have never seen her in my life." And in that moment, she realized the silent hell she was living in was far deeper and more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The reality of living under the same roof with a man who planned to destroy her was a special kind of psychological torture Tim Main hadn't left. He had simply moved into the guest room, transforming their once warm home into a frozen battlefield where emotional landmines were hidden in every corner. Nyla had to face her enemy every single day, share the same air, and worst of all, pretend that everything was perfectly normal in front of Zariah. And Timane executed his strategy with chill imperfection when their daughter was present. He became the world's greatest father, coming home from work earlier than he had in years, his arms laden with expensive gifts and his voice dripping with feigned warmth. One night, he arrived with a large box featuring a cartoon princess. "This is your new tablet, Zariah," he exclaimed, hugging the girl tightly. "This is much better than the old one. It has a better camera, and Daddy installed lots of games for you." Zariah's eyes lit up with delight. "Wow, thanks, Daddy." Nyla, who was folding laundry in the living room, could only swallow the hard knot in her throat, her heart aching as she watched him so blatantly buy their daughter's loyalty. Timane's campaign of subtle destruction was relentless and insidious. He systematically undermined Nyla's authority as a mother at every possible turn. If Nyla prepared dinner, he would stroll into the kitchen, taste the food, and announce in front of Zariah, "Honey, the soup is a little salty again. It's okay. Tomorrow we'll order takeout." If Nyla sat down to help Zariah with her homework, Naeem would swoop in and interrupt. "Let me do it, princess. The way mommy teaches you is too complicated. You're going to get confused." Each comment, each intervention was a small precise cut designed to make Nyla seem incompetent. She felt herself growing smaller and more invisible in her own home, a ghost being slowly erased. She began to doubt her own capabilities. Did she really cook badly? Was she truly incapable of teaching her own daughter? Timane played his role so well that he was successfully gaslighting her, making her question her own reality and solidifying the false image of an inept woman. Zariah, caught in the middle of this silent war, began to show signs of confusion. It was clear she loved her mother deeply, often clinging to Nyla as if seeking an anchor in the shifting emotional tides of the house. But she was also a child, easily dazzled by the constant attention and shiny new gifts from her father. Sometimes, after Timane would pull her aside for a quiet whisper, Zariah would look at Nyla with a hesitant, almost uncomfortable expression, as if seeing her through her father's critical lens. One night, unable to sleep, Nyla crept into Zariah's room to check on her. Her daughter was sleeping peacefully, the expensive new tablet glowing on her desk. But as Nyla leaned down to tuck her in, she noticed something strange. Clutched tightly in Zariah's small hand, hidden under her pillow, was her old, cracked tablet, the cheap one Nyla had told her not to use for fear the broken glass might hurt her. Nyla frowned, puzzled. Why was Zariah hiding this broken device when she had a brand new one? She dismissed it as a child's simple emotional attachment to an old toy, completely unaware that this seemingly insignificant object held a secret powerful enough to shatter her husband's entire carefully constructed world. The climax of this domestic warfare came a few days later. Nyla was waiting for Zariah to return from school, having promised to bake her favorite chocolate cake. But an hour passed after dismissal time, then 2, then 3. Zariah never arrived. Frantic with worry, Nyla called the school, only to be told that Zariah had been picked up by Timane. He hadn't told her anything. She called his phone again and again, receiving no answer. It wasn't until 9 p.m. that she finally heard his car pull into the driveway. Zariah bounded inside, laughing and carrying a large bag full of souvenirs from an amusement park. Timane followed calmly behind her, a smirk plastered on his face. "Where have you been?" Nyla shouted, her voice a mixture of tears and rage. "Why did you take Zariah without telling me?" "I was dying of worry. Daddy took me to Wonderland Park, Mommy." "It was so much fun," Zariah exclaimed. Timane looked at Nyla with icy contempt. "So what? I'm her father. I have the right to take my own daughter. Besides, you aren't doing anything at home." And then, as he stepped closer, Nyla smelled it, the soft, unmistakable, and unfamiliar scent of a woman's perfume on his shirt. It was the final sickening piece of the puzzle falling into place. The unfamiliar perfume on Timane's shirt hung in the air between them, a fragrant accusation more damning than any legal document. He saw the dawning horror in Nyla's eyes as she recognized the scent, and instead of flinching, he smiled, a cold, cruel twist of his lips. He waited for Zariah to run upstairs to put away her new toys, and the moment they were alone, he closed the distance between them, his face so close she could feel his breath. "Did you notice?" he hissed, his voice low and full of venom. "Did you really think I was going to live forever with a woman as boring as you? You are nothing compared to her." Nyla stumbled back, gasping for air as the final, devastating truth slammed into her. There was another woman. All of this, the coldness, the legal attack, the character assassination, was nothing more than a cruel, calculated attempt to get rid of her, to clear the way for his mistress. "Who is she?" Nyla whispered, her voice cracking with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. "None of your business," Timmain spat. "She is a successful, intelligent woman who knows how to please a man unlike you." Later that night, as Nyla sat alone in the darkness of her room, trying to process the depth of the betrayal, a small knock came at her door. It was Zariah, her face etched with concern. "Mommy, why are you crying?" she asked softly. Nyla quickly wiped her tears away, forcing a weak smile. "I'm okay, princess. My head just hurts a little." But Zariah looked at her with a gaze that was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "Are you really sick, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small. "Daddy says that since you're sick, you are often sad and angry. Daddy said that if I go live with him later, Mommy will be able to rest and get better." Nyla's heart shattered into a million pieces. Timmain wasn't just poisoning the court against her. He was methodically poisoning their own daughter's mind, manipulating Zariah into believing that leaving her mother was an act of kindness, a necessary step for Nyla's own recovery. She pulled her daughter into a tight, desperate hug. "Zariah, listen to me," she whispered fiercely into her hair. "I am not sick. I just love you so much. I promise I won't get angry anymore." But the damage was already done. As Zariah pulled away, Nyla saw the flicker of hesitation and confusion in her daughter's eyes, the seed of doubt her father had planted already taking root. The mediation hearing was a brutal farce, a staged event where Timmain and his expensive lawyer, Attorney Cromwell, demonstrated their total control. Seated in a stuffy windowless room, Attorney Abernathy began calmly, stating that Nyla only wanted custody of Zariah and was willing to discuss property. But before he could finish, Cromwell interrupted him with a dismissive wave. "There is nothing to talk about," he said harshly, slamming a file onto the table. "Our client's position is clear. Nyla is the failed party. It has been proven she cannot maintain a home or raise a child. Our client demands full custody for Zariah's future." Timmain sat beside him, wearing a mask of blank victimhood. "I only want the best for my daughter," he said with a tone of fake sadness that made Nyla's skin crawl. "Taking her away from her mother is the best for her." Cromwell then leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper directed at Nyla. "If you keep insisting, we will take this to trial. And I assure you, all the evidence we have will humiliate you. The photos, the credit card statements, the expert testimony. You'd better sign this agreement. Our client is being benevolent by allowing you to leave with nothing and without Zariah. Are you crazy?" Nyla screamed, the pressure of it all finally breaking through. The mediator tried to intervene, but Timmain and his lawyer were an immovable wall of cold ambition. The mediation broke down completely, and as they left, Attorney Abernathy placed a steadying hand on Nyla's shoulder. "Stay strong, Nyla," he said, his voice low. "The real fight begins now." The first day of the trial arrived, and Nyla walked into the cold, intimidating courtroom with a knot of dread in her stomach. The high wooden walls and the judge's authoritative gavel seemed designed to crush the spirit. Timmain sat across the room, looking confident and fresh in a new suit, occasionally sharing a quiet joke with Attorney Cromwell. The trial began, and Cromwell was a force of nature, fluent, loud, and sure of himself. He presented his version of the facts, showing the photos of the messy house and accusing Nyla of being lazy and dirty. He flashed the credit card statements, painting her as wasteful and financially irresponsible. "Your Honor," Cromwell declared dramatically, While my client worked hard to earn money, his wife was at home wasting it and neglecting her daughter. Neela wanted to scream, to shout that it was all a lie, that he had set her up, but she could only sit there, clasping her hands together under the table until her knuckles turned white. Attorney Abernathy did his best to refute the claims, explaining the context of the photos and the credit card use, but his arguments sounded weak and defensive against the mountain of so-called physical evidence. The judge took notes, his expression unreadable, and Neela felt the walls of the courtroom closing in, the noose of Tamin's conspiracy tightening around her neck. Then came the moment Neela had been dreading most. The plaintiff calls his expert witness, Attorney Cromwell announced, his voice ringing with confidence. Dr. Valencia, child psychologist. The courtroom door swung open, and every head turned as the woman entered. Neela held her breath. Dr. Valencia was beautiful and elegantly dressed in a professional blazer, her hair pulled back in a severe but stylish bun. She walked with a confident, measured stride that commanded attention, looking nothing like the villain Neela had imagined, but every bit the convincing, credible expert. As the woman took her oath, a faint, familiar scent drifted across the room. The same soft, expensive perfume that had clung to Tamin's shirt that terrible night. Neela's heart stopped dead in her chest. It was her. The mistress was not just a secret lover. She was the eminent child psychologist, here to deliver the final professional blow that would legally separate a mother from her child. The sheer audacity of the scheme took Neela's breath away. Valencia took the stand and began to speak, her diction clear and her tone calm, lacing her testimony with psychological jargon that sounded impressively scientific. She detailed her covert observations of Neela and Zariah, twisting mundane, everyday moments into a damning portrait of maternal failure. First observation, she stated coolly. At a shopping mall, Mrs. Neela pulled Zariah forcefully, speaking to her loudly, which made the child cry in fear. This shows a low capacity for emotional regulation. Neela closed her eyes, remembering the sheer panic of that moment when Zariah had nearly thrown herself onto a descending escalator, and her own terrified shout was the only thing that had pulled her daughter back from serious injury. But in Valencia's hands, a mother's protective instinct became verbal abuse. Second observation, Valencia continued. In a park, Mrs. Neela seemed absorbed in her phone, ignoring Zariah, who was playing alone. When Zariah fell, Mrs. Neela's reaction was exaggerated and hysterical. Another lie. Neela had been texting a grocery list Tamin had demanded. She had looked up the instant Zariah tripped, running to console her, her reaction that of a concerned parent, not a hysterical one. But each lie was delivered with such steady conviction that it sounded like unassailable truth. My conclusion, Valencia said, turning her steady gaze directly to the judge, is that Mrs. Neela does not have the stable emotional capacity to raise a 7-year-old girl. There are strong signs of parentification syndrome, where she subconsciously projects her own unhappiness onto the child. She paused, letting the heavy diagnosis hang in a silent courtroom. For Zariah's mental health, I strongly recommend full custody for the father, Mr. Tamin. Who is the more stable figure? The testimony was devastatingly powerful, a masterclass in character assassination disguised as clinical science. Neela cried silent tears of fury and helplessness. It's a lie, she whispered desperately to Attorney Abernathy. It's all a lie. She is Tamin's mistress. It's her. Calm down, Neela, Abernathy replied tensely. Don't react. That's what they want. When it was his turn for cross-examination, he tried his best. Dr. Valencia, are you sure you can make such a serious diagnosis based solely on distance observations? Valencia offered a slight condescending smile. On the contrary, counselor, natural observations without the subject's awareness are the most accurate. There's no manipulation. Abernathy pressed further. You were paid by Mr. Tamin for this testimony, isn't that right? I was paid for my professional services, counselor, she retorted cleverly, not for my conclusions. My conclusions are objective. She had an answer for everything. covering every hole with professional ease. The trial adjourned for the day, and Nyla left the courtroom with her legs shaking, feeling completely destroyed. She had seen Timaine smiling slightly, nodding to Valencia with a look of pure satisfaction. In the lobby, she leaned against the wall and sobbed. "We lost, attorney, we lost. They have everything." But Attorney Abernathy remained silent for a moment. His eyes narrowed as he watched Timaine and Valencia walk away, discreetly separated but not entirely far apart. "Not yet, Nyla," he said in a low voice. "I know something is wrong. The way she looks at him. It's not the way a professional looks at a client. We have to find out who she really is." In the days that followed, a grim determination settled over Nyla. Attorney Abernathy called her to his office, his face etched with fatigue from digging into Dr. Valencia's background. "The result is different from what we expected," he said bluntly, and Nyla's heart raced. "Her credentials are clean." "Too clean." He explained that Valencia was registered with the Psychological Association and had a seemingly legitimate practice. Either she is a real psychologist that Timaine hired to lie for money, or he forged this entire identity very cleanly. "The truth is, we cannot attack her by accusing her of being a fake. The court would dismiss our claim immediately." The brief flicker of hope Nyla had clung to vanished instantly. "So we can't prove she's lying?" she asked, her voice hollow. "No," Abernathy sighed. "We simply can't prove she isn't a psychologist. The only way is to refute her testimony. And that means you have to testify, Nyla." He looked at her with intense seriousness. "You have to tell your whole side of the story. And most importantly, you must not get emotionally upset. Attorney Cromwell will try to provoke you. He will want you to look hysterical in front of the judge, exactly as Valencia described you." Nyla nodded silently, the weight of the entire case now resting squarely on her shoulders. "I will do it, attorney. I will try." The day of her testimony arrived, and Nyla felt a cold sweat on her palms as she was sworn in. Attorney Abernathy began with gentle questions, guiding her to tell the story of her life as a housewife. She explained in a voice that trembled, but fought to remain calm, speaking of leaving her job to care for Zariah, her daily routine from dawn to dusk. She explained the context of the messy house photos, her severe illness, Timaine's refusal to help. She detailed the credit card, how Timaine had possession of it, and she had trusted him. She was honest and raw, and she saw a few people in the gallery looking at her with sympathy. But then it was Attorney Cromwell's turn. The cunning lawyer stood up, smoothed his tie, and approached with a sneer. "So, you mean to say," he began in a sickly sweet tone, "that your hard-working husband set you up on purpose? That everything is his fault? Are you perfect?" He moved in for the kill, his voice sharpening. "You say you were sick. Do you have a medical report? No? So there's no proof. It's just your word against real photographic evidence." He shifted to the credit cards. "You never reported the card misuse? You never reprimanded your husband? Doesn't this prove you are negligent and financially irresponsible?" Nyla's voice rose in frustration. "I trusted him. He was my husband." "Blind trust," Cromwell snapped. "A trust that ruined the family finances." Then, Cromwell delivered his masterstroke. He returned to his table and picked up a large, printed photo, holding it up for the entire court to see. It was a photo of Nyla in her bedroom, her hair disheveled, her face contorted in a scream, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mrs. Nyla, can you explain this photo?" he asked with a triumphant tone. Nyla trembled violently, the memory of that night flooding back to Timaine coming home, calling her a useless wife, a burden, insulting her until she finally broke. "That night, he provoked me," she wailed. "So you admit it?" Cromwell attacked without mercy. "You admit you screamed hysterically, you admit you lost control. You are emotionally volatile, exactly as Dr. Valencia described, right?" "No," Nyla shouted, standing up from her chair. "He set me up. He is a devil." "He is." The judge's gavel struck hard. "Witness, calm down, sit down." Nyla sobbed, her shoulders shaking as she slumped back into the chair. She was destroyed. She had behaved exactly as they wanted. She looked hysterical. She looked unstable. She was the image of the failed mother they had fabricated. She looked toward Timane and saw him with his head bowed, making a fake grimace of sadness, the perfect picture of a man pained by his wife's instability. The judge shook his head slowly, his expression making it clear he had taken a side. That night was the longest of Nyla's life. The sentencing hearing was the next day, and she knew she was going to lose. She was going to lose Zariah. She went into her daughter's room, where Zariah was already asleep. Timane was not home, likely celebrating his impending victory with Valencia. Nyla sat at the foot of the bed, stroking her daughter's hair, her tears falling silently onto Zariah's cheek. The girl stirred. "Mommy?" she murmured, half asleep. "She go back to sleep, princess," Nyla whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. She hugged her daughter tightly, perhaps for the last time as a full-time mother. "I want you to know, whatever happens tomorrow, Mommy loves you very much, always." Zariah, sensing her mother's profound sadness, hugged her back tightly. "I love you too, Mommy." As Nyla slowly undid the hug, she saw it again, the corner of the old cracked tablet sticking out from under Zariah's pillow. The child was clutching it tightly, even in her sleep. Nyla, too destroyed by the day's events to think more deeply about the strange attachment, simply kissed her daughter's forehead and left to face what she believed was the end of her world. The courtroom the next morning was colder than ever, the air heavy and suffocating with finality. Nyla sat rigidly in her chair, her eyes puffy and empty from a sleepless night, a woman already resigned to her fate. Beside her, Attorney Abernathy stared ahead with a somber expression, knowing they had faced a giant and lost. The atmosphere on the opposite side was a brutal contrast. Timane looked fresh and confident in a new suit, exchanging quiet, victorious jokes with Attorney Cromwell. In the gallery, Nyla saw Valencia, elegantly dressed in a cream-colored dress, looking at her with a barely visible smile, the smile of a victor savoring her triumph. The judge entered, and the room fell into a dead silence. Nyla's heart beat so hard it was physically painful. The judge began formally, stating the purpose of the day was the reading of the verdict, but first he allowed closing arguments. Attorney Cromwell stood, summarizing his victory with skill, pointing to the irrefutable evidence, the photos, the financial records, and the eminent Dr. Valencia's testimony. He even referenced Nyla's breakdown in court, using it as further proof of her instability. "Your Honor, the choice here is very clear," Cromwell declared. "It is not about punishing the wife, but about saving the child. For Zariah's best interest, I beg you to grant full custody to our client." He sat down, his smile smug and self-assured. It was then Attorney Abernathy's turn for a final desperate plea. He stood slowly, his voice soft but firm. "Your Honor, what we have witnessed here is not proof. It is character assassination. A very well-planned defamation." He argued that photos can lie, that financial statements can be manipulated by the party in control, and that the expert testimony was based on fragments of incidents taken wildly out of context. "Your Honor, we are not saving a girl," he said, looking directly at Timane. "We are witnessing a greedy husband try to get rid of his wife, steal her assets, and cruelly take away the only thing most precious to her, her daughter. Nyla is a good mother. She is not perfect, no mother is, but she has dedicated her life to Zariah. Do not allow this well-woven defamation to destroy that bond." He sat down. His argument had been emotional and excellent, but Nyla knew it wasn't enough. Abernathy's case was built on belief and appeals to conscience. Cromwell's was built on a mountain of fabricated physical evidence and a convincing expert. In the cold eyes of the law, the winner was already decided. The judge cleared his throat, put on his glasses, and opened the thick file before him. This was the moment. Having reviewed all documents from both parties, heard all testimonies, and considered all evidence presented, the judge began in an expressionless tone, and Nyla's heart shrank into a tiny frozen stone. The court notes that the plaintiff, Mr. Tremaine, has been successful in presenting significant evidence. Nyla lowered her head and closed her eyes, waiting for the final blow. The judge continued, listing the visual evidence of negligence, the financial evidence of irresponsibility, and then the most damaging blow. And most damaging is the testimony of the expert witness, Dr. Valencia, regarding Mrs. Nyla's emotional state. This testimony was unfortunately reinforced by the defendant's own conduct in the last trial, providing the court with a very troubling image of the psychological environment for the child's growth. Nyla began to cry silently. It was over. Tremaine allowed a slight, cruel smile of victory to appear at the corner of his mouth. Valencia sat up straighter, ready to applaud. With all considerations mentioned above, and especially for the best interest and mental health of the minor Zariah, the judge raised his gavel high. Nyla closed her eyes, ready for the sentence that would destroy her life. "Stop." The voice was small, but it cut through the heavy silence of the courtroom like a shard of glass. It was sharp and clear. Everyone turned in unison toward the source of the sound. In the slightly open door at the back of the room stood Zariah, alone, still in her school uniform. She had snuck in. Tremaine's face transformed from arrogance to shock and pure terror. "Zariah, what are you doing here? Get out of here!" He shouted in panic. "Guard," he tried again, his voice tense. "Zariah, sit down, princess." But Zariah didn't move. Instead, she walked into the courtroom, the sound of her small steps echoing on the marble floor. She didn't look at her stunned mother or her furious father. She looked directly at the judge. The room, which had been silent awaiting the sentence, was now frozen. The gavel, about to fall, stopped in mid-air. The judge's eyes widened, looking at the little girl in the doorway. Nyla turned around, her heart feeling like it was falling out of her chest. "Zariah," she whispered in disbelief. The judge raised his hand, silencing Tremaine's frantic protests. His gaze softened as it fell upon Zariah. "It's okay, princess," he said with a more paternal tone. "Why are you here? Who brought you?" "I came alone," Zariah said, her voice trembling but clear. "I heard my daddy say my mommy is bad." She swallowed, gathering her courage, her pure, clear eyes fixed on the judge. "But can I show you something? Something my mommy doesn't know." That phrase, "something my mommy doesn't know," hung in the air, charged with a mystery that froze the entire courtroom. Attorney Cromwell jumped to his feet, his face flushed with panic. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A recording from a child cannot be used as evidence. This is an invasion of privacy." But Attorney Abernathy seized the moment, his voice sharp with urgency. "That recording proves the lies of your expert witness, Attorney Cromwell. This is highly relevant." The judge bent his gavel, his eyes, previously paternal, now shining with intense interest. He sensed a monumental lie was about to be uncovered. "Enough arguing," he commanded. "Clerk, help this child. Connect that device to the court monitors right now." "No!" Tremaine screamed, his voice desperate as he gripped the table with white-knuckled hands. "I object, Your Honor. This is a setup." "Your objection is noted, Mr. Tremaine. Now sit down," the judge ordered. A clerk quickly approached Zariah and carefully took the cracked tablet. As he fumbled for a cable, the large monitor screens on the courtroom wall flickered to life, displaying the tablet's home screen. Tremaine covered his face in despair, while Valencia behind him began to shake violently. Zariah, standing next to the clerk, pointed a small determined finger at a video file in the gallery. The clerk clicked on it. "Go ahead, princess," said the judge. "Play the video." Zariah stretched out her index finger and pressed the play button. The large screen flickered, showing a slightly shaky tilted shot, the angle low as if recorded from behind something. A quiet laugh was heard. "It's our living room," Nyla whispered, recognizing the sofa and the large plant pot in the corner, Zariah's favorite hiding spot during hide and seek. Then, two figures entered the frame, Tamain and Valencia. But this was not the professional Dr. Valencia from the witness stand. This was Valencia in fine loungewear, her hair down. Tamain entered laughing and immediately hugged her from behind, kissing her neck. A unified muffled exclamation rippled through the room. Nyla froze, her breath caught in her throat. Her suspicions, the perfume, everything was true. On the other side, Attorney Cromwell stared at the monitor, his mouth agape, before turning to Tamain with a look of pure horror, as if to say, "You never told me this." In the gallery, Valencia lowered her head, trying to hide her face. Then, their voices came through clearly in a silent courtroom. Valencia's voice, coy and mocking. "Are you sure your plan will work? Your wife is so stupid." Tamain's voice, laughing with certainty. "Stupid and submissive. She won't suspect anything. All the money has already been transferred to your account, baby." Nyla felt her legs fail. Her money, their joint account, had been transferred to Valencia's account. "Oh God," Attorney Abernathy murmured beside her, his eyes fixed on the screen. The video continued its damning playback. Tamain sat on the sofa, pulling Valencia onto his lap. "Once the verdict comes out tomorrow," Tamain's voice declared, "I will officially get custody of Zariah. We will sell this house from hell immediately and move to Switzerland, far away from her." Then came the part that hurt Nyla the most. Valencia's voice, coquettish. "And Zariah seems very attached to her mother." Tamain's reply was dripping with disdain. "Oh, the kid is easy to handle. Just give her a new tablet and she forget her mother. You will be her new mother. A smarter, more successful, and much sexier mother." He kissed Valencia passionately on screen. "Enough. Turn it off." Tamain screamed in rage, jumping from his chair and trying to rush the clerk's table. "Officers, restrain him!" The judge shouted with fury. 2 security guards moved instantly, overpowering Tamain and bending his arms behind his back as he twisted like a trapped animal. "Let me go! It's not true! It's manipulated!" He screamed desperately. "Silence him," the judge ordered. "Continue the video. I want to see it to the end." The video played on, oblivious to the chaos. Now it was Valencia's turn to voice a worry. "I'm still a little concerned. What about my testimony as a psychologist? What if Nilas Lawyer refutes it?" Tamain laughed again, the sound now sinister through the courtroom speakers. "I already prepared. I recorded her last week when she cried hysterically, remember? I will provoke her again at the trial. I will insult her until she explodes. She will scream and cry in front of the judge." Nyla sobbed, remembering her testimony, the photo, her screams. He had set her up perfectly. Tamain's voice continued, sealing their fate. "Once she gets hysterical, your testimony will seem perfect. The judge will see for himself that she is an unstable, crazy woman. No one will believe her. They will believe Dr. Valencia, the professional." The video finally showed Tamain and Valencia toasting with wine glasses, laughing, before the screen went black. The room remained in a stunned silence for a few seconds, the only sounds Nyla's sobs and Tamain's panting breaths as he was held by the guards. Everyone had just witnessed a meticulously planned evil conspiracy of fraud, perjury, theft, and manipulation of the court. The truth, recorded on a child's broken tablet, had utterly annihilated the house of lies Tamain had built. The bang of the judge's gavel was not just an order. It was a release of the furious tension that had frozen the room, shattering the stunned silence into controlled chaos. The security guards dragged a gasping, sweat-soaked Tamain to a chair. His eyes were frantic, his expensive suit ruined, the arrogant victor of moments ago now a defeated man who knew it was utterly over. At the back door, a commotion erupted as Valencia, in a blind panic, found the exit locked by the judge's order. She pulled and pushed at the handle in vain before a female officer intercepted her. Valencia collapsed to the floor, her professional mask completely gone, replaced by the hysterical, sobbing visage of a terrified woman, the very image she had worked so hard to falsely pin on Nila. "Bring her here," the judge ordered, his voice cold and unforgiving. The officers dragged the sobbing Valencia to the front, placing her in the witness stand that now felt like a defendant's box. Across the room, Attorney Cromwell looked like a melting wax doll, pale and with a crooked tie, staring blankly at his papers, his career and reputation destroyed in an instant by a child's secret recording. The judge took a deep breath, smoothing his robe as he fixed his piercing gaze first on Tamain, then Valencia, and finally Cromwell. "Mr. Tamain," he began, his voice quiet but terrifying, "that video is the property of your daughter, recorded in your own home. Do you still insist it is manipulated?" Tamain raised his head, his face empty, and made one last pathetic attempt to shift the blame. She set me up," he muttered, pointing a trembling finger at Valencia. "That woman planned everything. She seduced me." Hearing this, Valencia screamed immediately, her loyalty shattered. "Liar, you told me to do it. You told me you would marry me. You told me you would transfer all the money to my account. I did all this for you." The judge banged his gavel again, silencing their mutual betrayal. "Silence, both are the same. Your confessions are now part of the court record." He turned his wrath on Valencia. "Miss Valencia, you sat on this stand under oath and gave false testimony. You used your credentials to destroy a mother's life and aid in a crime. You have committed perjury." Then, he looked at Attorney Cromwell. "And you, counselor, did you know, or should you have suspected, the evidence you presented was false? You disgrace this profession. I will see the ethics committee revoke your law license." Cromwell bowed his head, unable to utter a single word in his defense. Finally, the judge looked at Tamain, his gaze so piercing it seemed to flay the man alive. "Mr. Tamain, you entered this courtroom demanding justice. You accused your wife of failure, of instability, demanded her assets, and most heinous of all, demanded to separate a child from her mother." The judge lifted Tamain's lawsuit file and held it high for all to see. "Let's review your lawsuit." He began to tear it apart, piece by symbolic piece. First, the accusation that the wife failed and neglected the home proven false. "The video demonstrates you conspired to defame her." He threw a sheet from the file to the floor. Second, the accusation that the wife was financially irresponsible proven false. "The video is a confession that you stole money from your joint account and transferred it to your mistress. This is theft." He threw a second sheet. Third, the accusation of emotional instability, backed by false expert testimony proven as a blatant scheme. "The video proves you conspired to provoke your wife and use it to deceive this court." He threw the third sheet with contempt. "Your entire lawsuit," the judge's voice rose to a thunderous declaration, "is a pile of garbage based on lies, greed, and adultery." The court dismisses entirely the divorce petition presented by Mr. Tamain. The gavel struck hard, but he wasn't finished. The judge now looked at Attorney Abernathy and Nyla, his expression shifting from fury to protective authority. "The court will not stop here. Based on this new evidence, the court rules to protect the victim." He raised a finger. 1. Full custody of the minor Zariah is granted unconditionally to her biological mother, Mrs. Nyla. Nyla gasped, tears of overwhelming relief now streaming down her face. She looked at Zariah, her little savior. 2. The judge continued. "Mr. Tamain's suit is dismissed. However, the court suggests Mrs. Nyla file a countersuit. Mrs. Nyla, do you wish to divorce your husband?" Attorney Abernathy whispered to her. With a trembling but firm voice, Nyla looked directly at her defeated husband. "Yes, Your Honor. I demand a divorce right now." "Good," the judge exclaimed. The court grants the divorce to Mrs. Nyla on the grounds of adultery and fraud by the husband. Full custody to Mrs. Nyla. He stood tall. 3. All assets in the name of Mr. Tamain and Ms. Valencia are frozen immediately. The court orders a full investigation to trace all stolen funds. The house is declared the total property of Mrs. Nyla and Zariah. He raised a fourth finger, his voice resonating with finality. And 4. Based on the video evidence and the confessions in this room, I order the immediate arrest of Mr. Timain and Miss Valentia for multiple criminal offenses, including conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and domestic theft. Take them away. The guards immediately handcuffed Timain and a sobbing Valencia, dragging them away. The man who had entered with arrogance was led out with his head bowed, not daring to look his wife in the eye. Neela, still trembling, felt Attorney Abernathy pat her back, a wise smile on his face. We won, Nyla, we won. The aftermath of that judgment day spread like wildfire, a story of justice served that captivated the city. The tale of the broken tablet, the greedy husband, the fake psychologist, and the 7-year-old heroine dominated the news for weeks. With Attorney Abernathy's help, Neela navigated the blur of those first few weeks. The court's orders were swift and decisive. All of Timain and Valencia's assets were frozen, and the investigation proved Timain had transferred nearly $1 million to Valencia's account, all of which was seized and returned to Nyla. The big cold house was now officially hers, but it was filled with too many shadows, too many ghosts of Timain and Valencia lurking in every corner. With a newfound sense of freedom, Neela sold the house, the proceeds giving her more than enough to start a new, independent life far away from the painful memories. The punishment for the villains was severe and fitting. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Timain was sentenced to 12 years in prison for fraud, theft, and perjury. Valencia, whose credentials were real but criminally misused, was sentenced to 8 years and had her psychologist's license permanently revoked. As for the cunning attorney Cromwell, he was swiftly disbarred and faced criminal charges for his role in the conspiracy. Karma had been paid in full. 3 months later, the sound of children's laughter filled the small, sun-drenched park. Neela, the weight of the world finally lifted from her shoulders, watched from a bench as Zariah soared on a swing. They had moved to a modest, cozy 3-bedroom apartment, a home filled with photos of just the two of them and the warm, comforting smell of cookies Nyla baked herself. She had started a small catering business from home, and the culinary skills Timain had always belittled were now praised by a growing list of clients. She was busy, she was tired, but for the first time in years she was truly happy and gloriously independent. "Mommy, look!" Zariah called, running over with hands dirty from soil, pointing to a small flower bed. "The flowers are going to bloom soon," Nyla smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "Wow, my daughter is very good at planting things." They sat together in the afternoon sun, a perfect picture of hard-won peace, and Nyla knew it was finally time to ask the question that had been burning in her heart. "Princess," Nyla began softly, "can I ask you something?" "What, Mommy?" Zariah looked at her with those clear, honest eyes. "The video on the old tablet. Why did you record it?" Zariah was silent for a moment, gathering her memories. "Because I didn't like Auntie Valencia," she stated simply. "Why didn't you like her?" Nyla asked. "Auntie Valencia pretended to be nice," Zariah explained. "She smiled at you at the mall, but when you went to the bathroom, she told Daddy, your wife takes too long. And in the park, she told Daddy you weren't watching me. But you were watching me." Neela was amazed by her daughter's sharp perception. "And that night," Zariah continued, "Daddy said he was working late, but I heard his car. I wanted to show him my drawing. But when I went down, I saw him come in with Auntie Valencia. He hugged her right away. I got scared, so I hid behind the flower pot. I used the old tablet to record. I remembered you said if there are bad people, there must be proof." Nyla's heart swelled, realizing a lesson she had forgotten she'd taught had taken such profound root. But the most important question remained. "Why didn't you tell Mommy, Princess? Why did you keep it a secret?" Zariah's voice dropped to a low, confessional whisper. "Daddy said Mommy shouldn't know." Nyla felt a fresh pang of anger at Timain's manipulation. "In the video, Daddy told Auntie Valencia, my wife is stupid. She won't know." Zariah explained with the pure literal logic of a child. "I thought it was a big secret because Daddy said Mommy shouldn't know, so I kept it. I didn't want Daddy to get mad if Mommy found out." Nyla understood then. Her daughter had been carrying this heavy secret, obeying her father's wicked command without understanding its evil intent. "So, why did you show it in court?" Neela finally asked, her voice thick with emotion. Zariah's eyes welled up with tears. "Because the judge was going to take me away from Mommy. Daddy said you were bad. And Auntie Valencia said you were bad. And that's not true." She looked at her mother, her love shining through. "I don't want to be separated from you. Mommy isn't bad. Mommy is the best mom. So I had to show the judge that Daddy and Auntie Valencia are the bad ones." Nyla could no longer hold back. She pulled her daughter into a crushing, tearful embrace, crying tears of pure, unadulterated joy. For all those months, she had suffered under the accusation of being a failed mother. But here was the ultimate proof of her success. A daughter who was not only incredibly brave and sharp, but who possessed a pure, unwavering sense of justice and love. "Thank you, Princess," Nyla whispered into her daughter's hair. "Thank you for saving me. I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Zariah." And in that warm embrace, surrounded by the promise of blooming flowers, Nyla knew she had never failed. She had been raising a heroine all along, and now, together, they were finally free.